Well, you lace up your boots and you walk on down to a knockdown shack on the edge of town. There's a Latin beating comma that I just won't quit. Keep a walking till you see a blue light lit fall in there. Can you dig them sights down at the house? The house of blue lights. Be sure to spend your brights down at the house of blue lights.
Thank you so much, everyone, and welcome to Visitas. We are the Harvard Crocodillos, Harvard University's oldest a cappella singing group, founded back in 1946 at the historic Hasty Pudding Club. We've got some great music coming up for you right now before Visitas Thinks Big starts. But before we move on with the rest of our program, we would first like to take a brief moment to just introduce ourselves. Hi.
L is for the way you look at me. O is for the only one I see. V is very, very extraordinary. E is even more than anyone that you adore. Can love is all that I can give to you. Love is more than just a game for two. Two and love can make it. Take my heart, but please don't break it. Love was made for me and you. L is for the way you look at me. O is for the only one I see. V is very, very extraordinary. E is even more than anyone that you adore. Can love is all that I can give to you. Love is more than just a game for two. Two in love can make it. Take my heart, but please don't break it. Love was made for me and you. L is for the way you. And O is for the only. And V is very, very extraordinary. E is even more than anyone that you adore. Can love is all that I can give to you. Love is more than just a game for two. Two when love can make it. Take my heart, but please don't break it. Love was made for me and love was made for me and love was made for me and you. Yeah, yeah.
Let me tell you about a girl I know. She's my baby and she lives next door. Every morning when the sun comes up, she brings me coffee in my favorite cup. That's how I know, yeah, I know. Hallelujah, I just love her so. When I'm in trouble and I have no friends, I know she'll stay with me until the end. Everybody asks me how I know. I smile at them and say she told me so. That's how I know, yeah, I know. Hallelujah, I just love her so. Now if I call her on the telephone and tell her that I'm all alone, by the time I count from 1 to 4, I hear her knocking at my door. Every evening when the sun goes down, and there ain't nobody else around. She kisses me and she holds me tight and tells me, baby, everything's alright. That's how I know, yeah, I know. Hallelujah, I just love her so. Now if I call her on the telephone and tell her that I'm all alone, by the time I count from 1 to 4, I hear her at my door. Every evening when the sun goes down and there ain't nobody else around, she kisses me and she holds me tight and tells me, baby, everything's alright. That's how I know, yeah, I know. Hallelujah, I just love her so. Hallelujah, I just love her so. Hallelujah, I just love her so. Love her so. In a young girl's heart, how the music can free her whenever it starts, and it's magic. If the music is groovy, makes you feel happy like an old-time movie. I'll tell you about the magic, it'll free your soul, but it's like trying to tell a stranger about a rock and roll. Do you believe in magic? Don't bother to choose if it's just Latin music or rhythm and blues. Just go and listen. It'll start with a smile. It won't wipe off your face no matter how hard you try. Your feet start tapping and you can't seem to find how you got there. So just blow your mind. Believe in the magic of a young girl's soul. Believe in the magic of a rock and roll. Believe in the magic that can set you free. If you believe in magic, come along with me and we'll dance until morning, just you and me. And maybe, if the music is right, I'll meet you tomorrow somewhere late at night. And we'll go dancing, baby, then you'll see how the magic's in the music and the music's in me. I'll tell you about the magic, it'll free your soul. Ah, magic. By on bonny banks and yon bonny braes, where the sun shines bright on Loch Lomond, where me and my true love were ever wont to gaze. On the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. Oh, you'll take the high road and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland afore ye. But me and my true love will never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. 'Twas there that we parted in yon shady glen, by the steep, steep side
of Ben Lomond, where deep in purple hue the highland hills we view, and the moon coming out in the gloaming. Oh, you'll take the high road and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland afore ye, but me and my true love will never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. The wheat birdies sing, and the wildflowers spring, and in sunshine the waters are sleeping. But the broken-hearted can stay a second spring again, though the woeful may cease from their greeting. Oh, you'll take the high road, and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland afore ye, but I and my true love will never meet again by the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. Here's my story, it's sad but true. It's about a girl that I once knew. She took my love and she ran around with every single guy in town. Oh, 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 na 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 na, oh, 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 oh. I should have known it from the very start. This girl would leave me with a broken heart. So listen, people, what I'm telling you. I'll keep away from her, run around too. I miss her lips and the smile on her face, the touch of her hair and this girl's embrace. So if you don't wanna cry like I do, I'll keep away from her, run around too. Oh, 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 oh. Sue likes to travel around, yeah, she'll love you and she'll put you down. So people, let me put you wise. Sue goes out with other guys, here's the moral of the story from a guy who knows. I fall in love and my love still grows. Ask any fool that she ever knew the same. I'll keep away from her, run around Sue. Oh, 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 oh. Sue likes to travel around, yeah. She'll love you and she'll put you down. So people, let me put you wise. Who goes out with other guys? Here's some more of the story from a guy who knows. I fell in love and my love still grows. I scan a fool that she even knew the same. I'll keep away from her, run around Sue. Oh, keep away from that girl. I don't know what it is. Keep away from that Sue.
That old black magic's got me in its spell. That old black magic that you weave so well. Those icy fingers up and down my spine. That same old witchcraft when your eyes meet mine. That same old tingle that I feel inside. And when that elevator starts its ride, down and down I go, round and round I go. I'm like a leaf that's caught in the tide. Now I should stay away, but what can I do? I hear your name, and I'm a flame with such a burning desire that only your kiss can put out this fire. Yes, you're the lover I have waited for, the mate that fate had me created for, and every time your lips meet mine, oh darling, down and down I go, round and round I go. I'm in a spin, I'm loving the spin I'm in, I'm loving that old black magic they call love. Now I should stay away, but what can I do? I hear your name, and I'm a flame with such a burning desire that only your kiss can put out this fire. You're the lover, you're the lover, you're the lover, you're the lover I have waited for. You're the mate that fate had me created for, and every time your so tender lips meet mine, oh darling, down and down, round and round, oh I'm in a spin, I'm loving the spin I'm in, I'm loving that old black magic they call love. It's got me singing and a swinging and a spinning around like an elevator going down, with no defense against the witchcraft that you're using on me, against your potions, your dark arts, your apology, against that whole black magic, that magic called love.
When I hear that serenade in blue, I'm somewhere on another world alone with you, sharing all the joys we used to know. Many moons ago. Once again your face comes back to me, just like the theme of some forgotten melody in the album of our memory. Serenade in blue. It seems like only yesterday, a small cafe, a crowded floor, and as we dance the night away, I hear you say forevermore, but then the song became a sigh, forevermore became goodbye, but you remained in my heart. So tell me, darling, is there still a spark, or only lonely ashes of that flame we knew. Should I go on whistling in the dark? Serenade in blue.
It seems like only yesterday, a small cafe, a crowded floor, and as we dance the night away, I hear you say forevermore, and then the song became a sigh, forevermore became goodbye.
But you remained in my heart. So tell me, darling, is there still a spark? Or only lonely ashes of that flame we knew? Should I go on whistling in the dark? Serenade in blue, blue. Serenade in blue.
Thank you so much, class of 2022, and welcome to Visitas. We are the Harvard Crocodillos, Harvard University's oldest a cappella singing group, founded back in 1946 at the historic Hasty Pudding Club. It's so exciting to have you guys here with us this weekend, and unfortunately, this brings us to the end of our set. But if you're interested in learning more about our group, you can visit us online at www.crocs.com, KROKS.com. And if you're interested in singing with us next year, we're holding fall auditions when you get here in September. And we have openings in all voice parts. So if you're interested about that, also check us out on our website. But unfortunately, again, this brings us to the end of our set, but we hope that you will enjoy this, our final number. Thank you very much.
Good morning or evening, friends. Here's your friendly announcer. I have serious news to pass on to everybody. What I'm about to say could mean the world's disaster, could change your joy and laughter to tears and pain. It's that love's in need of love today. Don't delay, send yours right away. And hate's going round, breaking many hearts. Stop it, please, before it's gone too far. The force of evil plans to make you its possession, but it won't if you let it destroy everybody. We all must take precautionary measures. If love and peace you treasure, then you hear me when I say, oh, that love's in need of love today. Oh, don't delay, send yours right away. And heads going round, breaking many hearts. Stop it, please, before it's gone too far. Oh, that love's in need of love today. Oh, Don't delay, send yours right away. And hands going round, breaking many hearts. Stop it, please, before it's gone too far.
May we have your attention, please? Welcome to Sanders Theater. We ask that you turn off all cell phones and other electronic devices. The use of cameras and recording equipment is prohibited. Please take a moment to identify the nearest exit. In addition to these 6 regular exits, there are 2 emergency exits at the back of the mezzanine and balcony levels. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Marlon McGrath, and on behalf of my colleagues in the admissions office and my colleagues in the faculty, I want to say how grateful we are that we have such a great crowd today. We are thrilled to have you. Our faculty are delighted, the 4 people who will be chatting with you, speaking with you, talking with you about what they do, are very glad to see new students. Many of you, we hope, will be new students. This is a show. This is not a series of academic lectures. The reason the lights are dim is to remind you that it's really a show. This is to give you a sense of what people do who teach and do research here. Some of you may have read, and if you haven't read it, I urge you to read it in preparation for the next part of your life, a wonderful children's book, I think they call it a children's book, by Richard Scarry called What Do People Do All Day? Anybody read that book? Anyway, it's a great book. If you haven't read it, the Harvard Coop is open. I would urge you to read it. It shows you in irresistible form the pleasure that people have when they do the stuff they do all day. And what you'll get today, I hope, is a sense of what 4 remarkable members of our remarkable faculty do all day, what they care about, what they do. Part of the purpose of having this show is to remind you of the thing you should never forget at this moment. Whatever you think about what college you're going to or what you're going to do in college, whatever it is, if you're not having fun, you want to rethink the plan. And that's part of the subliminal message of today. In any case, I will stop. You're not here to hear me. I will introduce our first guest. Professor Mahadevan has a quite extraordinary title, so I might as well give it to you. The Lola England de Valpine, get this part, Professor of Applied Mathematics and Professor of Physics and of Organismic and Evolutionary Biology. Who says you can't be a revolutionary, a Renaissance man, and be present in all the scientific revolutions? His education began in India. He has degrees, though, from Texas at Austin and from Stanford in mathematics, and also a PhD in mathematics from Stanford. He's the winner of MacArthur Fellowship, a fellow of the Royal Society of London, which is even older than Harvard, which is, imagine that. And he's won Harvard's George Ledley Prize, which is given every 2 years to a person who has made the most valuable contribution to science or in any way for the benefit of mankind. Does not get better than that, except also, I should mention, on a par with that, he's the faculty dean of Mather House, one of the 12 residential upper-class houses. So without further ado, I will let him take his laptop and do his entertainment part of this event. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for a very generous introduction, Malan. Good afternoon and welcome. The poet William Blake, in his Auguries of Innocence, begins with the lines, "To see the world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower and hold infinity in the palm of your hand." Combining a metaphoric vision of the very familiar material perceptual world with a very unfamiliar ethereal notion, that of infinity. Mathematics is this pinnacle of abstract thought in the search for and the study of patterns, and is conjured up and created in our minds. It also provides a language that enables understanding the world as we observe it and the world as we might imagine and create it. And so it's surely remarkable that these abstract ideas allow us to describe and predict the world outside our window, and even more, perhaps, that we can effectively bend matter to do our will by thinking and calculating before manipulating it. For example, it allows us to understand how sand flows, how flowers bloom, and how organisms like you and I build themselves. And it is the foundation, mathematics is the foundation of how to manipulate matter and create art, artifacts, tools, and machines, even if you are only subliminally aware of it. This is the realm of Middle Earth, where mathematics is increasingly finding inspiration from the scale of patterns in space and time in the observable everyday world, includes biology and chemistry, and eventually enables engineering. In Middle Earth, phenomena are familiar, but their causes and consequences are not, as they pile on top of each other in more and more complex ways. In fact, complex from the Latin complicare comes associated with fold together. I'm going to tell you about some problems, all of which have little adventures associated with folding. Of our work in this area, all of which have to do with how matter is organized in space and time on the scale of the Earth itself, on scales associated with thousands of kilometers, on the scale of ourselves, and trying to understand, for example, the organization of the brain, and on the scale associated with the kinds of art and artifacts that we essentially create, using mathematics to describe, using mathematics to predict, and eventually using mathematics to essentially design. My first example is associated with, as I said, understanding our home, Earth itself. The most obvious feature of our planet is that it's a spheroidal, watery surface. And if you look a little more carefully, you look at islands, you can see volcanoes. And when you look at these islands and volcanoes very carefully, you essentially see that they lie along arcs. And that's very common, close to home near the Caribbean, further away near Japan, further north from here, the Aleutian Islands associated with Alaska, and many, many other places. Okay, so you have a sphere which is mostly covered with water. You look closely, you see that watery surface pockmarked, and associated with these pockmarks, you see islands. And these islands sit along curves. And so one can ask, why do these patterns arise? How can we do so? So I'm going to use an analogy, a metaphor and an analogy, and I'm going to use an analogy to something that you're familiar with. The Earth is spherical. On the Earth, we have magma, which is coming up, associated with the mid-Atlantic oceanic ridges. That magma is hot, it rises to the top, it starts to cool. As it starts to cool, it starts to become heavier, and it starts to fall back. But the Earth's surface is curved, so how can it essentially fall back? In trying to understand that, we essentially built an analogy associated with taking a ping pong ball, and you push it hard enough, or if you're a very good ping pong player, hit it so hard that it essentially puckers. And when it puckers along a curve. Or you take a Coke can or a Coke bottle, and you push on it, and it also puckers, and it puckers along a curve. Or you take a balloon, which you may have painted, and then you allow it to deflate, and also puckers along a curve. And so this essentially gives you an analogy on the everyday scale of what could happen when I shrink the surface of the Earth 1,000 kilometers or 6,000 kilometers in radius down to the scale where we can essentially use our intuition to essentially build an experiment. And if we do that, we can essentially then create a mathematical analogy. As I said, mathematics is the study of patterns, and if you study patterns, and we're trying to understand how patterns relate to each other, and these analogies are useful because they allow us to switch from one kind of system to another. For example, in fact, even though mountains look like they are solid, and the Earth that we stand on is solid on the scale of our lifetime, it flows on the scale of millions and hundreds of millions of years, going back all the way as it was described in the Bible itself. And one can use computer simulations to essentially create a simulation of what this continental shelf looks like as it starts to collapse. And then one can essentially create mathematical formalisms which allow you to make predictions. So we start with a description, that of island arcs. We create an analogy, and then we use this analogy to essentially make predictions which we can just test, not only on our Earth, but increasingly, hopefully, over the next decades, as we start coming across extrasolar planets, we can essentially test whether similar things happen elsewhere outside our Earth. And that's the power of mathematics, the ability to essentially jump from one problem to the other using analogies and using calculations. My second vignette switches from consideration of the physical world to the biological world and to ourselves. This is an image of a human brain. This is an image of a fetal brain as it progresses through development, starting from the folds that first form about 20 weeks after gestation and then reaching more or less their mature state just before birth. Of all the iconic images that you see in biology, perhaps the one that exemplifies complexity is essentially that of the brain folding itself. How does this happen, and why is it important? If you have a folded brain, by the way, we are not the only organisms which have these. If you have a folded brain, then you have a large number of neurons which can be packed in a small volume with a very small wiring length, which means that you have the ability to essentially create and process information very, very quickly, and therefore perhaps increase your cognitive capacity. What is the origin of these folds? One can essentially ask how to quantify these folds by looking at how it changes over time, characterized by something called the gyrification index, which just basically tells you what the actual area of the brain is compared to the area of the surface itself. That increases. Our humans have one of the largest gyrification indices, and one can ask, how does this happen? In fact, it happens because neurons deep inside the brain migrate as we develop from the inside towards the surface, increasing the surface too much, and a consequence of increasing the surface too much is that the whole thing folds. So can we understand that? And again, we can use mathematics and we can use analogies. How did we do this? We built an experiment with a piece of gel, actually something rather similar to Jell-O. You can use printing to essentially create a model of the human fetal brain. You put it in a dish which causes the gel to swell because it absorbs liquid from the outside. And you can see in 15 minutes or so, this is a movie that's been sped up, in 15 minutes or so, you essentially are able to see the same patterns that you actually get on the surface of a brain, except on a piece of gel. You understand that even better if you create a mathematical and a computer simulation. So this is one that I'm showing you over here, and that allows you to eventually start looking at the correlations between the real brain and a simulated brain. So what's happened over here? What have we basically learned? We can simulate computationally and mimic physically both normal and abnormal brain growth and link them to morphologies which are normal and dysmorphologies. And so if there are functional consequences, as there are, because different parts of the folded brain are associated with different functions, loss of function and loss of folds correlate with each other, and mathematics allows you to essentially make some sense of it. Okay? So I've told you a little bit about the physical world. I've told you about the biological world. I want to now move to my third and last vignette, using mathematics to describe and predict the behavior of matter as it is in the non-living world, and move beyond that to essentially design a world that never was. Artists and children, of course, do this all the time. For example, you may be interested in folding a piece of paper and creating origami, okay, from the Japanese ori for fold and kami for paper. Everybody, I'm sure, has attempted to create a butterfly, a crane, or a kite. And everybody, I'm sure, has also been thwarted in trying to create a dragon. Okay? You've been thwarted metaphorically, you've been thwarted physically, and you've been probably thwarted mentally as well. Which begs the question, can you essentially move between something which is perfectly periodic? So this is essentially what you might think of as the hydrogen atom of an origami. How can you go from the perfectly periodic to a dragon by modulating the folds, moving the folds around, and ending up here rather than over there? Okay? Can you do that? So can you essentially create something which is somewhere in between this, which is the result of almost every calculation that I've ever done? But it's not so bad, because if I have a crumpled piece of paper, I can use it to drape my hand. I can use it perhaps to drape my body. And I can maybe even use it to drape my head, all of which are very different. Some things are cylindrical, some things are saddle-shaped. So can I do better? Can I go between that and this object, okay, which a student of mine essentially built, but it's perfectly periodic. So this is kind of boring. This is also kind of boring. Can we go in between? And mathematics allows us to do that. In fact, On the top, you can see the results of some calculations that we did, allowing us to become tailors, but mathematical tailors, using origami to create spheres, saddles, pillboxes, candelabrums, and vases. And then we can essentially build them. Okay? I want to finish by saying that not only can we do that, we can essentially move beyond and not only create folded patterns, but also growth patterns, allowing us to essentially do something like build a flower, an orchid. This is a calculation. That's the real thing, based on the calculation built now from printing inks, clever kinds of inks, on a flat sheet, and then allowing it to dip, putting the whole thing in water and allowing it to swell. And you can even grow a face. Okay. Using mathematics, we can essentially create these complex structures. Each one of these adventures started with observations, led to an abstraction mathematically, allowed us to analyze things, and then allowed us to move further. I started with the poet Blake. I'll end with the painter Picasso. Okay? And what you see over here is a series of sketches of a bull, which describe exactly the same process that a mathematician or a scientist essentially uses when they are faced with complex problems. You have the real object. In fact, you have something which perhaps is not quite something like the real object because you haven't observed it carefully. You start observing it carefully, and it becomes more and more realistic and more complex. And then you start stripping away what you can until you have the essence of a bull. Taking away any more, you wouldn't recognize it. Adding more basically doesn't really add so much if I'm trying to describe and make a connection to you. So the same ideas associated with mathematics appear in art. They appear as abstraction, they appear as analysis, and they appear as analogy. How do we not get overwhelmed by the detail? How do we not leave out the essence? I'm going to stop here. Many of you will not become scientists or mathematicians. But just as one doesn't have to be an artist to appreciate art, one doesn't have to be a scientist or a mathematician to appreciate the wonders around us and in us. While science today is thought of first and foremost as the engine of progress in the world around, I think it can, and I think it should be equally an aesthetic and artistic endeavor, a natural expression of our innate curiosity as humans. There is mystery and magic even in the everyday world, and what is more, it can be experienced all the time by all of you. Make this a habit and share it, and good luck with your decision.
Well, our next performer is Emma Dench, who is professor of the classics, professor of ancient and modern history, and in this I'll mention this and move right on, but I will not deny that she is now Dean of the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. Don't let that bother you. She attended King's High School in Warwick, England. She has degrees from Oxford, writes books, does all the things that you would expect a very distinguished classicist historian to do. Her most recent book is Imperialism and Culture in the Roman World. She is a great teacher. She has been awarded, this is a big prize here, a Harvard College professorship which recognizes advising and teaching devotion to undergraduates. And she's received lots of other forms of recognition of her work with our undergraduates. Here's the point, here's the place to note that we, unlike other great institutions in this country, don't have two separate faculties, a faculty for graduate students in arts and sciences on the one hand, and a faculty for college students on the other hand. Our faculty are all one unit, as it were. But Emma has also been a visiting professor at the Harvard Business School across the river, where she taught a course, I have to read you the title, All Roads Lead to Rome, Leadership Lessons from Antiquity. And she's also been a resident in Quincy House with her family. But I will stop and introduce her for her performance for us today. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That was what you just went was an almost impossible task. A human up her computer. I think it happened. Hopefully. Yes, my God. Round of applause for me. Because obviously it's all about me, it's not about you. So what, Harvard, what is it? What the heck? What is it with all that Latin? Latin everywhere. We get perfectly respectable Latin for truth. Visitas? I'm impressed. I'm very, very impressed. Whoa. I'm even more impressed. Do you know where this is? This is a little bit of a treasure hunt. You have to find, this is the seal on the side of the John Harvard statue. It reads, Academiae Harvardianae Sigillum, 1638. I'm not doing that in Latin. It's the seal of Harvard. 1638. You heard the tour that takes you to the John Harvard? Spoil it for you? Yeah? The John Harvard statue is totally fake. But lovely Latin seal of approval, Harvard University. What the heck? What is it? Latin to authority and power, we have to go into Latin. Am I all right? We didn't start that. The Romans, whose language Latin is, were pretty good, I would say pretty good at power and authority. Large empire. Yes. Yes? Try it again. Yeah. Oh my God. You heard. Did you say? Gosh.
Check, check.
Thank you. They do this on purpose, you know, just to see if we can handle the stress. So I was talking. Sadly, you missed it all, but never mind. I was talking about Latin and power and authority, and why there's Latin everywhere in Harvard. Just start noticing it now. And what I wanted to say is that we didn't invent this connection between the Romans, whose language was Latin, and authority and power. The Romans were pretty good at it themselves. Here we show the fasces from which... Is any geniuses here? Oh, I forgot you're all geniuses. So fasces from which modern English word is derived from fasces? Fascist, very good, exactly. So the Romans loved to make a show of their ability to intimidate people. The fasces are an absolutely delightful object. They're a bundle of rods with attached axes. And they're symbolic. They're carried wherever a Roman political or military officer goes. But they're not just symbolic, because if I am a Roman political officer, I make you obey me. And how do I make you obey me? Because I've got these carried in front of me all the time, and at any moment I can get my subordinates to undo the rods and the axes and either beat you up for not obeying me, or if I really, really cross, I can chop off your head. Whoa, way to go. So the Romans were pretty good at intimidating people, pretty good, solid language of authority and power. So what are we going to do with all this Latin? Are we going to be intimidated by this? Class of 22, are we? No. Are we going to use it to intimidate others? You're really horrible. I'm not sure I want you here. No, neither of the above. We're going to get to know the Romans. Remember, the Roman Empire was a very big world, and once you actually start focusing in, it's not Hollywood, it's not all dead white men. There's actually a huge amount of variety, and the Romans are surprisingly relatable up to a point. But it's worth it. Like any long dead, far away people, it's worth tuning into them and finding out what they're all about. And you start off and they seem, completely relatable, like you and me. And then you get to a certain point and it all goes weird. You know the thing about imagining powerful people on the toilet? Do you? That's what you're meant to do, imagine powerful people on the toilet. It's sort of, so that you're not frightened of them anymore. Well, start imagining the Romans on a toilet. It's a communal affair. Lots of you all sitting on the toilet all together, which is nice. And then there's these lovely shared sponges, which have the function. Again, hang out with the Romans, start off perfectly relatable. And then, just here when it says Rob, that's the god Robigo, the god of rust, to whom you sacrifice a couple of puppies. Oh, yes. Now I'm being horrible. But I say, why not? Just stay with them a while, keep listening. When did you last hang out with somebody whose sentence you absolutely couldn't finish, that they're unpredictable? It's good for us. It's really good for us. And hang out a bit longer with the Romans. Do you know who this person is by any chance? You probably don't. It's Caligula. Lovely old Caligula. Caligula, the Romans had lots of mad, bad, evil emperors, right? Really, really evil. Caligula allegedly made his horse a consul. Well, why not? It wasn't the worst thing he did, but made his horse a consul. Lovely. But the Romans, we're obsessed with the Romans' mad, bad, dead emperors, each one crazier than the last. Actually, so were the Romans. But they did much more interesting things with them than Hollywood. The Romans used their mad, bad emperors as object lessons. And I think those object lessons can teach us something. They teach us about how hard it is to find a middle path between being so kind of scared of the world that you won't get out of bed and being so risk-taking that you're happy to scorch the whole earth and kill everybody in your path. They really think about these issues. They think about the middle path between, you know that, perhaps this is the British thing, but there's an apple and a pear, and there's you and your friend, right? This is one situation. And you say to your friend, would you like the apple or the pear? And the friend, this is when I say this is the British thing, the friend says, I don't mind. Which would you like? And then what do you say if you're British? You say, I don't mind either. And then nothing happens. That's probably is just a British thing. So that's one path to not getting anything done. And then there's another extreme when you just bulldoze everybody in your path and you lead everybody over the edge. So the Romans were obsessed with, there are extremes of behavior, and somewhere in the middle, you might find a happy medium between being totally intimidated and intimidating everybody else. And I think with all this genius in the room, that's a pretty good object lesson. See you in 2020. No, see you in 2020. I'm going completely mad. See you in the fall.
Our next performer will be Sean Kelly, who is Teresa and Ferdinand Martignetti Professor of Philosophy. He, by the way, comes to us via, well, not directly via, but did attend high school in Reading, Connecticut, so he's getting more and more local to us. His PhD is from Berkeley in philosophy. I'm saying this for a reason, by the way. He has a bachelor's in mathematics and computer science, and a master's degree in cognitive and linguistic sciences from Brown, which is a wonderful place in Rhode Island. He has written a lot of books. People are interested in philosophy these days in immediate, humane, non-academic terms. And he's written all kinds of books, academic and otherwise, but his recent books are called, for example, The Relevance of Phenomenology to the Philosophy of Language and Mind, and All Things Shining, Reading the Western Classics to Find Meaning in a Secular Age. Real books that real people want to read, too. And he is newly now the faculty dean of Dunster House. You notice we have a fairly good representation of people who actually run these residential houses that we're so proud of. So, without further ado, Sean.
Thank you very much, Marlon. I'm also a humanist, and so I'm terrified that the technology is going to break. But I have the backup here. Can everyone hear me? Excellent. So I'm supposed to give you a big idea that's so big that it fits into 10 minutes. And I don't know exactly how to do that. You'll find that Harvard faculty have a very difficult time speaking for less than 53 minutes, which is the length of our lectures. But my big idea for you today is that it matters where you are. That's what I want to talk about. I think we live in a society that pushes against this idea increasingly. Just take the idea of online education, which I know you're all familiar with. It makes it seem as though you could learn everything you want to know just by watching a bunch of YouTube videos. But learning is a lot more than just imbibing information, and teaching is a lot more than just pouring information into an empty vessel. Living a human life, a genuinely human life, and learning the way a human being does, it seems to me, means engaging with the place that you find yourself in a thoughtful way. So I want to tell you how being here at Harvard, in this place, has changed the way I teach and the way I think about the research that I do. I want to tell some stories. So I arrived at Harvard in 2006, coming up on 13 years ago. And the first thing I did was to buy a copy of the collected letters of William James. How many of you have heard of William James or know who William James is? Okay. For those of you who don't know about William James, in a way, I'm jealous of you. The experience of learning about him is a delightful one, and I hope you'll do that. Buying these letters was the first effect that the university had on me. I hadn't been interested in William James before, but he played such an enormous role in the history of this institution that when I got here, I thought, boy, I better find out something about him. He was a great 19th and early 20th century philosopher and psychologist, equally a philosopher and psychologist. In fact, he founded, roughly, the discipline of psychology. So here at the university, the philosophy departments and the psychology department claim him equally, although it's only the psychology department that has managed to build a big, ugly building and name it after him. So, but his salient seemed much more obvious to me, and it turns out he is sort of tied up with this place. He grew up in a building that's no longer here, but is just steps away from here. The place of it is just steps away from here on Quincy Avenue, where the faculty building now is. And he stayed here throughout the late 19th century and the early 20th century until he died in 1910. You might know of him if you know his brother, the famous American novelist Henry James. And the two of them had a sister, Alice James, who's mysterious and fascinating to me. Everybody who knows about her says that she was more talented than either of her brothers, but because of the injustices of American society then, and even to some extent now, she didn't ever become as famous as they did. But in any case, this building, Memorial Hall, since it was built in 1878, when James was just starting his career here as a young faculty member. This building is a building that was around when he was here, and it's almost certain that at least one of you, maybe more, is currently sitting in a place that William James himself once sat. Now, I was interested in James because he was interested in what seems to me the deepest and most important question that we can think about. That's the very general question, what does it mean to be a human being? This is a question, of course, that all religions have a take on. It's a question that many sciences think about. Psychology, of course, anthropology, sociology, artificial intelligence. But it's also a question that I think is at the foundation, even at the origin of the discipline of philosophy, which is the discipline that I now teach in. If you go all the way back to the 5th century BCE in Athens, Greece, you'll find the famous philosophers Socrates and Plato, and they were obsessed with this question, not only what is it to be a human being, but sort of relatedly and following from that, what does it mean to live a human life well? That seems to me an important question, and the 1st century BCE Roman orator Cicero, who Professor Dench knows a lot about, used to say that philosophy, because it's so obsessed with this fundamental question, is ultimately about the art of living. So I was interested in reading James's letters because I wanted to find out what he thought about the art of living, and he thought about it a lot. And so I started reading his letters when I first got here. I started at the end of his life because, you know, old people, they know a lot about this kind of thing. And so I started reading letters, and I found out that 6 months before James died, he'd taken a trip to France. And I found some letters that he had exchanged with a contemporary French philosopher, a famous French philosopher at the time, named Émile Boutroux. And the letters between James and Boutroux, they suggested that Boutroux had somehow obtained for James an item and sent it to James here in Cambridge. It was an item that James referred to in the letters as the Pascal death mask. Now, Blaise Pascal is a 17th century French philosopher. I teach him regularly in my introductory existentialism course. And so I was interested to know what this death mask is. A death mask, of course, is a fascinating and bizarre object. It's an object that's taken from the face of a person who has just died. A sculptor will come along at the moment of death and fold wax onto the face of the person and gain a direct impression of their face moments after the spirit of life has left them. And somehow James had obtained a copy of the Pascal death mask, and he reports that he found comfort in gazing at it in the evenings as the end of his life was approaching. He knew he was about to die. I found this bizarre and sort of gruesome, as I am sure you do too, but also kind of fascinating. And I thought, boy, I want to know what happened to that death mask, because James had it in 1910. That's a cue for my friend Eric Johnson de Beaufray, who is the librarian in the Robbins Library here at Harvard. I started looking for this death mask with the help of Eric, and we had trouble finding it. We did discover that James had left it in his will in 1911 to Robbins Library, the library that Eric is, the philosophy department library where Eric is the librarian, but we couldn't find it. We searched everywhere. I even told the students in my existentialism class who had spent weeks reading Pascal, I said, if you can find it, automatic A in the class. The school newspaper loved this. They wrote a whole story about it. But I really believed it. I thought, well, maybe it's hiding in a closet somewhere. Some student is going to open their sort of closet in their dorm room and discover this thing. Or maybe it's Emerson Hall was renovated in the 1960s. Maybe it's sort of behind a wall that didn't used to be there. Something like that. We searched. We discovered, with a lot of help from Eric, we discovered that it was probably destroyed about 50 years ago. But then an amazing thing happened. Eric called up the place where they have the original of this death mask. And they said, well, we do have one other copy, which for an undisclosed amount of money, we could sell to you. And so this mask here, which, if you can't see it, here, now the technology, if you can't see it, that's an image of it. This mask here is one of 3 copies of the original death mask of Blaise Pascal. It's now held in Robbins Library. And one of the things that's extraordinary to me as a teaching moment, when I teach Pascal for several weeks, and then at the end, I bring in this mask, and the students come up, and they look at it, and they touch it. Not much, just a tiny bit, Eric. You didn't hear that, Eric. So they come up. There's something extraordinary that happens. There's something amazingly compelling about being before the mask that's taken from the mold of the person who died 350 years ago, whose work you've been reading and thinking about for weeks, and knowing that this was so important for the philosopher William James, who was here, who was so important to us, whose work engages with Pascal's work, and so on. It's fascinating, and it's helped me to change my understanding, although I still don't know entirely what my understanding is. It's helped me to change my understanding of what James meant when he said he got comfort from contemplating, gazing at this mask towards the end of his life. I want to tell you one other story that's related to James. He retired. He died in 1910. He retired in 1907. In 1905, the building that the philosophy department is in now was built. We call it Emerson Hall, after the early 19th century American philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson. And there's something really interesting about Emerson Hall. It's got on it some inscriptions carved in stone. Now, one of them is very important for us in the philosophy department. Over the main entrance, it says, philosophy. And we love that because it means the administrators can't take that building away from us. That's our building. Computer science is not going in there. But over the side entrance, it says something else. And there's a story that goes along with what it says. The story is probably apocryphal, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway because it's interesting and it's related to the other object I want to show you. The story is this. In 1903 or 1904, when President Charles William Eliot, was supervising the building of Emerson Hall, according to this story, he wrote to the most famous philosopher in the department, William James, and he said, well, we need an inscription. We need something that's inspiring, that people can read when they cross through the portals of the building. What do you recommend? And according to this story, James said, I can think of nothing better than the great saying by the pre-Socratic Greek philosopher Protagoras from the 6th century BCE, man is the measure of all things. And if you think about this statement, man is the measure of all things, the way people usually think about it, it sort of makes us pretty important. Human beings, pretty important. Maybe even like the center of everything that is. People often think it involves a commitment to what's called a kind of subjectivism that puts human beings at the center of the universe. So, according to the story, James proposed this inscription, and then in 1905, they had a big ceremonial opening of Emerson Hall, and they had the veil over the stone, and President Eliot said, now take the veil down, and he took the veil down, and you can imagine William James turning white with anger or fear or misunderstanding or something when he read not an inscription from the Greek figure Protagoras, but instead a scripture, a motto, a saying from the scriptures, from the Psalms, in fact. It says, from Psalm 8, it says, what is man that thou art mindful of him? And this seems to give the totally opposite story about what human beings are. We're so unworthy of the love of God that every time we experience ourselves as being loved by the ground of everything that is, we stand in awe before that experience. And I think this story, even though it's probably apocryphal, is pretty amazing because sitting as we do at this point in history, in the end of history, at this end of history, we have two cross-cutting heritages, two cross-cutting traditions. Typically, they're associated with Athens and Jerusalem. And they have this strong tension between them. And we're stuck in the middle of the crosshairs. On the one hand, it feels as though we're at the center of the universe. On the other hand, it feels as though we're so insignificant that it's amazing that anything in the universe cares about us at all. And it seems to me that we all deal with that, deal with the tension between those two sort of deeply felt experiences that we have as the result of having this cross-cutting heritage. Now, this is probably an apocryphal story, but as it turns out, we do have evidence that James loved this saying from Protagoras. When we were rooting, Eric and I were rooting around in the department offices with our former department administrator, Ruth Kolodny, we discovered that hiding in one of the filing cabinets somewhere was this beautiful loving cup, it's called. Wait, I have to find, now you'll get to see, if you can't see it. That's what it looks like. And this, it says, because we know because of the inscription on it, this was given by James's students to him upon his retirement in January of 1907. And if you look very closely, it says in Greek at the bottom there, man is the measure of all things. It was a motto that he really did love. So I think what do I take from all this? What I take from all this is that living in the place that you do is really important. And I don't really mean to indicate that it matters that you live in this place, although I would, of course, love it if you were all here in the fall. But whatever place you live in, it seems to me what's really crucial is that you engage with it thoughtfully and intentionally. Pascal, this philosopher standing here, said something that I think is deep and important. He said, the sole cause of human unhappiness is that people don't know how to stay quietly in a room. And I take this to mean that the mysteries of human existence are standing right before you, no matter where you are, no matter what place you're in. They're waiting for you to unravel them. But you have to attend to them. You have to pay attention to where you are. And that's a never-ending process, but it repays the effort anyway. As teachers at Harvard and as learners at Harvard, it seems to me that we are fortunate to be in a place that has such a long history of engagement with these kinds of human mysteries. And I'm grateful to be able to share the process of unraveling them with my students. Thank you.
Our fourth and final actor today is David Malan, who has been with us for a very long time during his education at Harvard. I have known him since he was an undergraduate. He is Gordon McKay Professor of the Practice of Computer Science, and he's also a member of the Faculty of Education. He went to Brunswick School in Connecticut, another Connecticut person, if you want to know that. And he received his degrees from here in computer science, and he was in Mather as an undergraduate. Among his many other distinctions and contributions to Harvard, which really are legion, he teaches Computer Science 50. This is a very lowball way to put it, the Introduction to Computer Science, which is the largest course at Harvard College and has been the largest course at Yale as well. Figure that out. And his research interests, which are huge, broad, etc., include digital forensics, computer science education, and cybersecurity. Doesn't get more trendy than that. And it's a pleasure to welcome David Malan.
So I think I made a mistake when I first got here as a freshman some years ago. I immediately gravitated toward things familiar to me, right? Like I knew in high school that I liked history, I really liked my constitutional law class, and so when I sat down with my proctor, my resident advisor, those first weeks of school, and was thinking about what courses should I take and what should I concentrate in or major in, I really stuck with those things that I already knew. And so I signed up as a government concentrator, a gov major, and I spent the next year and a half of my life taking government classes and related fields in statistics and math and so forth. And yet, when I was in high school, I still had this curiosity about other fields, and I rather postponed in my mind once I became a freshman, I'll study some dramatic arts later on, some Latin later on, even then some archaeology later on. I kind of kept thinking, I'll get to my electives, but first I'm going to focus on just getting done what I think I should get done. And it was completely to the exclusion of computer science as well. In fact, I was always a bit of a geek, but I never had taken any CS courses in high school. I still remember kind of peering through the door of our computer science lab and wondering like what my geekier, or so I thought, geekier friends were actually doing with their heads hunkered down and typing away on some keyboard. And to me, it was just C++ or Java or these names that I had heard but didn't really know what they are. And indeed, that was what was true. I didn't really know what this other field was. And I didn't take this class, CS50, my freshman year because I was frankly scared of it. It had and still has to some extent this reputation to beware because it's so unfamiliar to so many students, myself included. And it wasn't until my sophomore year that I finally got up the nerve to sign up for CS50 after shopping it for 1 week. But even then, the only reason I got my foot in the door was because the professor at the time let me sign up for the course pass-fail. Because I think the crux of it for this field and a few others was that I feared failure, not doing well in a world that was completely new to me. I assumed that every other kid in the class had surely been programming since he or she was like 12 years old. And the reality was that's actually not the case. Even today, almost 70% of the students in CS50 were actually just like me and have never studied computer science before. But eventually I figured out, in that first semester I figured out exactly what it was that this field was. It wasn't about Java or C++ or even about programming. It was really about problem solving and thinking more carefully, more methodically about problems and how you can divide up and conquer problems in the real world, sometimes with the help of a computer. But frankly, you don't even need the help of a computer to solve these kinds of problems. Really, you just need an algorithmic way of thinking, a more methodical way of thinking. So what might this mean? So all of us these days have these kinds of devices in our pocket, and when you actually use it for old school purposes, like making a phone call, you might open up your contacts and maybe a little inefficiently scroll through the list of friends and family, starting with the A's all the way down to the Z's, or maybe a little more cleverly, you might do autocomplete and start searching. But how does that work? It's actually not all that different from our approach in yesteryear to looking up people we know in this device, right? There's a whole bunch of names alphabetically in this, and they have corresponding numbers, and that's exactly the same thing that's going on in your iPhone or Android phone or the like. So let's consider how the phone these days actually finds the friend or family member you want to call quite quickly in using this as the metaphor, really the derivative of what that, or the origin of what that device is. So I could open up this phone book, if I'm looking for someone like my friend Mike Smith, and look down at the first page, see that he's clearly not on it because Smith starts with S, and so I just keep turning the pages, one at a time, looking for Mike. Now, obviously, this is pretty slow, and it's going to take me forever to find him, but that's okay. I had I knew algorithms from when I was growing up. I don't have to do things one at a time. I can do them two at a time. So 2, 4, 6, 8. And this 2 is going to take a lot longer. But of course, no one in this room is going to do that. And our iPhones and Android devices don't do that. What would you do instinctively if you had a book that's even this big to find someone like Mike Smith? Yeah, so split it roughly in the middle. And of course, I'm going to end up in roughly like the M section, give or take. And Mike's not in the M section because Smith, again, starts with S. But what do I know about Mike Smith? Where is he in this book now? Yeah, he's kind of over there to the right because S comes after the middle of the phone book. And so both physically and metaphorically, can I divide and tear this problem in half, leaving just half of the phone book. Don't worry, I don't actually need this phone book anymore. So leaving just half of the phone book, but what can I do next? I can really just repeat that process. Now, of course, maybe I've gone a little too far this time, and I'm in the T section, not the S's, but that's okay, because I can, again, tear the problem in half leaving me now with maybe not 1,000 pages or 500. Maybe I'm already down to like 250 pages. And just look at the progress I'm making through the phone book, rather than 1 page at a time or 2 pages at a time, but apparently hundreds of pages at a time. And if I can continue this divide and conquer, or if we call it by its fancier name, binary search, bi meaning 2, and we keep dividing it in half, hence the 2, do we eventually end up, hopefully, with 1 page on which Mike Smith actually is. Now, what does this mean to be more efficient? It clearly is faster than just looking through every page or every other page of the phone book. But if we just think about fundamentally what we just did, and this doesn't even relate to computers, it just relates to thinking more carefully about a problem. If we think about, I saw that souvenir to go. If we just think about what we just did, well, let's just consider a very generic, not mathematically oriented at all, chart where this is like the size of the problem I care about. And by size, I mean like numbers of pages in the phone book. It's OK, you can keep it. The number of pages in the phone book. And let's just call the vertical axis here time. And what's the relationship among these 3 algorithms we just tried? Well, the first algorithm was just 1 page at a time. And every page might take me 1 second or half a second or whatever. So it's a very straight or linear relationship. More pages, more time. More pages, more time. Meanwhile, if I do 2 pages at a time, it's still the same linear relationship. I'm just going twice as fast. So the shape of that curve is the same shape, but it's lower. Because if I consider this many pages, in the first algorithm it took me this many steps, but in the second algorithm it takes me half as many steps, because I'm going two at a time. But what's the shape of that third and final, and frankly, much more intuitive algorithm that all of us have been taking for granted all these years, even if we've never studied computer science or programming or programmed? It turns out it's much, it doesn't get negative, it turns out it's much more curved. Like this. It happens to be called logarithmic. But the point is that in order for this third algorithm to take more time, you really have to keep going and going and going and really see how far out it goes before it really makes a fundamental impact on the amount of time it's taking. Put another way, if I doubled the number of pages in that phone book tomorrow, how many more steps would it take me to find that same person, Mike Smith? Just 1 more step. So if you double the number of pages, the amount of time required to find Mike Smith really just inches up ever so slightly. It doesn't maintain this same relatively slow approach. Now, we can actually do this in another way. What's another algorithm we might have in a venue like this? Well, it'd kind of be nice to know how many people are here. So I could do it old school and do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. OK, that's going to take forever. So I know how to do this better. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. But dang if we can't learn a little something from this. Now, I can't quite do this on my own, but what if we just said, you know, we need to leverage everyone here? And in fact, let me do this. Let's consider how we might visualize the counting of each other here. I need 8 volunteers who didn't know they were going to be volunteers earlier. How about all 7 of you stand up if you could? And can we steal number 8 over here? Come on over. All right, so I'm going to give each of these students here your very own CS50 pen. All right. And so you're each holding a pen, and let's go ahead and do this if we could. 7, 8. If all of you guys want to just spin around for the most uncomfortable thing you're going to do today, unbeknownst to you in advance. This is the class of 2022. Welcome to your classmates. And what's your name?
Miranda.
Miranda? Andrea? Lindsay? Virginia? Anna? Serena? Moti? And? Dora. All right, so thank you, all of you, for volunteering. So let's count the 8 of you. Now, there's obviously 8, so we know the answer to this. Stay right there if you could. But how could I go about counting just these 8? 1, 2, 3, 4, or 2, 4, 6, 8. So that's going to take me 8 steps or 4 steps. But can I do it in 3? Can I count these same groups, the same group of 8 students with just 3 steps? Well, let's consider this. How about this? Could half of you give away your pen to someone else who's standing, and then if you gave away your pen, just sit down? So half of you who are standing, give away your pen to someone else, and then that same half sit down. Okay, so now 4 of you are still standing, and each of you presumably have 2 pens. Well, let's repeat this. So half of you give your pens away to someone else still standing, and then sit down. And now there's just 2 of you, and in a moment there's going to be 1 lucky winner of 8 pens. So if the half of you, just 1 of you, could give your pens away, and then sit down. Okay, and then sit down. What's your name again? Lindsay is holding 8 pens, has the final tally, but how many times did we do that? We did it 1, 2, 3 times, because we went from 8 to 4 to 2, and then we were left with just the one person standing with all 8 pens. So a round of applause, if we could, for our volunteers. You should probably give them back to everyone, yes. So let's end by just considering how we can really do this en masse, because it would take me forever to count 2, 4, 6, 8. So could we actually do this together more intelligently, leveraging that same algorithm, that same step-by-step approach to solving a problem as follows? If I were to say, all right, this half of the room, count yourselves. This half of the room, count yourselves. We could just combine the result, just like these volunteers were repeatedly combining their results. So I don't have, unfortunately, hundreds of pens on me, but I can give you each a number. So let me just virtually give you each the number 1, including our volunteers. Everyone will participate if you could. So everyone, for the moment, think of yourself as the number 1. And now this is the awkward part for all of us. If you would humor me, and everyone stand up also in place. So everyone at this moment is thinking of the number 1. And just as with our volunteers, we're just going to do one round together, and then we'll pause, reset, and make sure we're good to go, and then repeat. Each of you is thinking of the number 1. If you could each verbally give away, half of you, give away that number to someone else next to you. Okay. So at this point, if you gave away your number, sit down, as half of you seem to have done. So at this point in the story, just a quick sanity check, everyone who's standing should probably be thinking of the number 2. Okay, so we're about to repeat this, whereby half of you next need to give away your number, which is now 2, to someone else. They add it together, and let me propose repeat until there's one person standing. And continue to repeat, give away your number, and let someone else take it from there. Okay. Keep repeating. If you're standing and not talking to someone, try to give your number away. Okay. Take another moment. Give your number away to someone else if you can, and then sit down. All right. I'll help out if need be, if it's a little too awkward to shout your number. I hear someone's offering 15. If someone wants the 15. Oh, 16. All right. Let me facilitate at this point, just because it might be getting a little awkward. So whoever's still standing, I brought my calculator just so I don't screw up my own arithmetic here. What number are you thinking of? You are 32, so go ahead and sit down. You are thinking? You are 37. Go ahead and sit down. You're 44. Go ahead and sit down. Who's still standing? 64. Go ahead and sit down. Who's still standing there? 67. Go ahead and sit down. Who's still standing? 45. Okay, you're set. 45. Go ahead and sit down. Back there. 64. Go ahead and sit down. Over here. 48. Go ahead and sit down. Back there. Sorry? 24, go ahead and sit down. Who's still standing? One more? 31 and 81, both of you can sit down. Is anyone still standing? Right here in the middle. 36, go ahead and sit down. Oh, right here. 24, I promise this algorithm's fast. 24, go ahead and sit down. Okay, and back there. 16, all right. So, did I miss anyone? Did I miss anyone? All right, so let's consider for just a moment what should have just happened. On each iteration or cycle of that algorithm, half of you were sitting down, then another half, then another half. So we were taking great big bites out of this same problem, just like we were taking big bites out of the phone book, and just as these 8 were iteratively having themselves again and again. And because each of them gave their pen away on each iteration, but we preserved the number of pens, just as you gave your number 1 or number 2 or whatever it was away, we preserved the total addition. Theoretically, the last person standing, which I guess will be me because I did all the adding here, should have the total count of people in this room. Now, the total I got, arithmetically, by adding that all up, is that there are, according to this algorithm, 613 people in the room. But we did it the old school way during that same algorithm, and the number we got earlier was just over 850 people. So that's okay. That's okay. This is our first example, perhaps, of a bug or a mistake in a program. And we'll come back to that this fall. Thank you. But rest assured, even if this was not within your comfort zone, or if you've never taken a CS class before, do consider exploring some new unfamiliar field in any of our 4 fields here and beyond, and do as I wish I had done way back then. Allow me to step off stage, though, and paint a picture in closing of not only the material and the world that awaits you, but also the community. This particular film that was put together by one of CS50's own former students, Emily Yu, who's behind the camera here right now on CS50's production team, paints a picture of the world that awaits you.
What about us? We are searchlights we can see in the dark. We are rockets pointed up at the start. We are billions of beautiful hearts, and you sold us down the river too far. What about us? What about all the times you said you had the answers? What about us? What about all the broken happy ever after?
So I hope you thought blended subtly content and ads. We do want to be very light-handed because we really want you to go to the college that you want to go to, and we hope it's Harvard, but we hope you choose well and have fun wherever you go. So thank you so much. As they say at the end of the classic cartoons, that's all, folks. It's all for this show, but we hope you enjoy the rest of the show today and tomorrow. Thank you for honoring us today with your presence.